Hi, my name is Neil Joshampule, and I'm bringing you this presentation on building a cube with SSAS. This is mostly a practical demonstration. However, in the beginning, I'm going to give you a breakdown of the steps we're going to go through. First, we're going to open up SQL Server Business Intelligence Development Studios. Then we're going to create a new analysis services project. Then we're going to create a new data source, create a data source view, create a cube, create the dimensions for the cube, and then create the aggregations, partition, translations, all of these, which I'll explain what they are later on as we're going through the actual program. I'm assuming you have knowledge of data warehouse theory already and know what dimensions and cubes are. The last SQL Server or SSAS version that actually uses cubes, from my understanding, is 2008 R2. It became obsolete as in SSAS 2012. So in the new SSAS, they use something called a tablix, and I'm going to be reading up on that later on. But for now, I'll just go through how to create a cube in SQL 2008 R2 SSAS. Alright, so let's get started. So first I'm going to go into my programs. I'm going to go to Visual SQL Server 2008 R2, and I'm going to start up SQL Server Business Intelligence Development Studios, which is right here where my mouse was. I get to the start page of Microsoft Visual Studios, and I'm going to create a new file, new project. I'm going to click on Analysis Services Project, and I'm going to name that Presentation SSAS Tutorial. Enter. So I created it. It's now loading. So now I'm brought to this screen. On my right, I have the Solution Explorer, which has data sources, data source views, cubes, dimensions, roles, assemblies, mining structures, and anything else you will want. On the left, I have my toolbar, which has nothing at the moment. So let's start. In my actual SQL Server database, at the moment I have a data warehouse, which is in relational database form, not in its cube form, and has dimensions as preceded by a dim, and it also has fact tables, which don't have anything preceding it. So my fact tables are internet sales and time. Sorry about any noise in the background. It's just my pet monkey making noise. Okay, so now top down 2 is the data mart I'm going to use in order to create this this cube. So now the first thing you have to do when you're creating a cube is create the data source. So new data source. This is the data source in SSAS is basically just a connection to your actual database in a relational database. So we're going to go and click on create a data source based on another object, because create a data source based on a new or existing connection. We're going to create a new connection by going to new. It's loading. I'm accessing my local server, so I'll use a dot, and I'm going to look for top down, the data mart that I just showed you. And then I go to test connection. Test connection succeeded. Okay. And we have located at the bottom, which is selected, the data mart that we'll be using to create our new cube. So I go to next. I'm going to access the database using my personal service account. If you have a username and a password, you could enter it with the specific Windows username or password, or you could use the credentials of a specific user, or you can inherit it, whatever you want. But for now, I'm just going to use a service account. You can read up more on that by yourself. The data source name is top down, and I'm going to click on finish. So now we have our data sources. However, the data source is useless unless you have a data source view. A data source view is basically a window into your actual RDBMS connection, which is the data source. So we go to next. Our new data source is listed over here, the relational data source. So top down too. I go to next. And now I select all the tables that I want to be accessed from that particular connection that I had created. So I want customers, employees, products, stores, and the 2 fact tables. I don't need the sys diagrams table because I don't use it in my actual cube. So I add it using the arrow sign. It's all added, and then I go to next. So as you can see here, it has a list of all the dimensional tables as well as the fact tables. Then I go on finish. Now I have access to all those tables within my SSAS window. So this new window opened up, the data source view, and as you can see here in the center is my fact table. The relations were defined in the actual relational database ahead of time. So if you look over here, we have internet sales, keys, and we have keys, foreign keys pointing to the individual dimensional tables. Okay, so now I need to tell SSAS what is what. So I'm going to create a new, so what are the fact tables and what are the actual dimensions. So I'm going to create a new cube. So I'm going to use existing tables. And as you can see here, select a data source viewer diagram and then select the tables that will be used for measure groups. The measure group tables are basically your fact tables. So I'm going to choose internet sales and time. Those are my fact tables. So, or you could even go to suggest, and if the relations are set up right, it'll know all automatically. Time is another fact table, however it's not connected. As of, oh no, it's a dimensional table, but so internet sales is actually my only fact table in this project. So I go to next, and so now we have sales amount, tax amount, internet sales count. Next, it's automatically adding the different dimensional tables. So here it was able to automatically see what dimensional tables existed. And I go to next based on my fact table, and then I go finish. And now my cube has been created and my dimensions are being created. So now if you click on your cube, you're going to see you have these options at the top of the newly defined window. So you have your dimensions usage tab, you have your calculations, with the calculations you could actually add calculated members, which are members whose values are dependent on something else, other measure values. You can add KPIs, which are basically key performance indicators. What the KPIs do is allow you to track the performance of your system over time. You got actions. What the actions do is make your actual cube dynamic, so you can make it so that when you click on a particular element in the cube or a particular column, it can open up in a browser, which will have different information or point you in a particular direction. Partitions are a way of separating your cube so it performs faster, so you could separate your cube into multiple hard drives so that it will work at a faster rate. You have your aggregations, which are basically their information about the information. So aggregations are the core of your cube. So they're basically ways of summarizing your data so that the cube will be able to go through it at a faster rate. So the more aggregations you have, the more thoroughly described your cube is and the faster it'll perform. However, there's a downside to that. Because there's something called data explosion. So the more aggregations you have, related to your data, the bigger your cube is going to be. Although you'll have a performance increase, this also means that your cubes tend to be exponentially larger than databases and all APs because of the metadata about the data. And then you have your perspectives. Perspectives are basically ways of showing specific data. So for example, since I have cubes can get pretty large and have multiple dimensions. However, only some of these dimensions are relevant to particular departments. So for example, you might have marketing, or you might have the business department, the marketing department, the CEOs. So basically these people will want to see different things because data will mean things to them, and other data will be meaningless and just be there for confusion's purposes. So you use perspectives to abstract this data and hide particular elements of the data. So you can have a marketing perspective, which will show only particular columns and rows and give access to, show them to a particular user. And you can have a sales perspective, which will only show the sales data to salespeople. Translations basically localize your cube to different language groups. So you might have sales amount, and when you're in French, you might want a French version of your cube, where all the columns and the details are in French rather than English. So by using translations, you can make it so that you have French column names and values, as well as German if you want. You can add as many translations as you want. So the cube is multilingual. You can make it so it compensates for different languages. And you have your browser. So what the browser does is allows you to browse through your cube. So let's see. It exists. So in the next tutorial, I'm actually going to show you how to go through these particular perspectives and what they do, and how to speed up your cube by adding the appropriate aggregations. However, I think I'm going to end this presentation for now. And that is all for now.